Hey, we begin a new week. I'm so happy that you're with us. We're going to have a terrific program. We've got a story from China that will warm your heart you don't want to miss. But in the news, for the first time in nearly 90 years, an American president has set foot in Cuba. He's trying to rebuild relations between our two countries, and after they've been hostile toward one another for more than half a century.
Critics say Cuba is still abusing the human rights of its own citizens, but others say the time has come to open the doors between the United States and the island nation. Gary Lane has the story.
President Obama is the first U.S. president to visit Cuba since Calvin Coolidge in 1928. He's hoping the historic visit will jumpstart a new relationship between the United States and the communist nation.
It's a historic opportunity to forge new agreements and commercial deals, to build new ties between our two peoples, and for me to lay out my vision for a future that's brighter than our past.
But only hours before he arrived in Cuba and toured Old Havana with his family, police clashed with human rights protesters. At least 50 demonstrators were arrested. Mr. Obama plans to discuss human rights when he meets with President Raul Castro. Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz tweeted support for the Cuban people and criticized the visit, writing in Politico, quote, "Political prisoners languishing in dungeons across the island will hear this message. Nobody has your back. You're alone with your tormentors. The world has forgotten about you. There will be no mojitos at the U.S. Embassy for them." Raul Castro denies their very existence. And GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump says he supports a new relationship with Cuba, but suggests President Castro should have greeted the president when he arrived.
There was nobody there to greet him. Folks, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? Now, here's how a thing like that is supposed to work. Number one, he has his people call up, say, who's going to be greeting the president? If they say nobody, you don't go until somebody's there because you don't want to look like a fool.
But not everyone is critical. American Alan Gross, released from a Cuban prison a year ago, told me the president's visit is a courageous move.
You sat in a prison cell for 5 years. Is it the right course?
Well, absolutely. If we had had diplomatic relations 55 years ago, 50 years ago, 45 years ago, 6 years ago, I might not have had to forfeit 5 years of my life. The whole idea of constructive engagement helps to avoid circumstances like this. And people who are critical of the process that we've recently gone through really need to take a look at that.
President Obama's visit will conclude Tuesday with a televised speech to the Cuban people, attendance at a baseball game, and a possible meeting with political dissidents. Gary Lane, CBN News.
It's interesting, he will not be meeting with Fidel. I don't know if Fidel Castro is too sick or they just don't want to get together, but that's another snub in a sense. Well, what about the church in Cuba? Is it suffering from oppression or is it free to grow? Wendy Griffith has that story from our CBN newsroom. Wendy.
Thanks, Pat. That's right. The president's visit comes at a time of renewed optimism in the Cuban church. It's been enjoying some relaxed restrictions, and it's hoping for fruitful partnerships with American churches. Heather Sells brings us the story.
Thousands of Cubans worshiped recently in a two-night open-air rally in Santiago, Cuba's second-largest city. Total attendance for this location and another in Havana, 25,000. Even more remarkable, the Cuban government allowed it. In recent months, the government has increased its arrests of political dissidents, so organizer Steve Cordone considers these events a miracle.
You have to do everything literally by faith, because you are not sure if they are going to approve or not the visas, the permissions for the places, and anything can happen.
What did happen, an outpouring of the Spirit as people worshiped, listened to the teaching, and came to faith in Christ. More than 1,400 came forward.
When we see so many people giving their lives to Jesus, that's the first and main fruit.
Worship 24/7, which sponsored the event, also distributed 30,000 Bibles, so important in a country where they are not easily found. Cordone says believers are planning to launch a small Christian magazine and Christian music festival. He's encouraged to see a younger generation with new ideas for what can be done in a country where the church has suffered so much for decades.
Because I see that they are starting dreaming, that there's new hope, that they are getting tools, they are being empowered.
Veteran missionaries say Cuban believers are also cautiously optimistic about working with American churches thanks to the easing of U.S. travel restrictions.
They would really love to have church-to-church partnerships where people could come down and help them start agricultural projects and other micro businesses that would allow them not only to meet their own expenses, but also to do the community outreach that they're dreaming of doing.
Stewart and other missionaries caution that Americans should approach Cuban churches with great respect. In many ways, it's the Cuban church that could teach the American church. As a global expert on church planting and evangelism in the midst of extreme hardship. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thanks, Heather. Well, here at home, the story of the Passion came to the streets of New Orleans in a live television musical. It was broadcast last night on Fox for Palm Sunday. The all-star cast included musical greats like Trisha Yearwood, Michael W. Smith, Yolanda Adams, and Chris Daughtry. Filmmaker Tyler Perry narrated the modern-day recreation of Christ's final hours on earth. Our Ephraim Graham brings us the behind-the-scenes look at this remarkable production.
It took more than 1,000 people to turn this New Orleans park into a television stage. And despite days of rain and chilling temperatures, all was ready at showtime. Tyler Perry returned to his hometown to help share the story of Christ's final hours on earth.
How does it feel to be back home doing this?
It's really exciting because I tell you, there's no better backdrop than New Orleans because it literally rose from a liquid grave. So to have this story being told of the resurrection in a town that was resurrected is powerful to me. Had it not been for my mother teaching me about the old rugged cross and teaching me about Jesus, teaching me about Christ, I don't know where I'd be. I really don't know where I'd be. It was a compass. It was a guiding light. Still, to this day, I'm getting chills thinking about it. To this moment, I know for a fact that I've been changed because of what she's taught me and what I know about Christ.
The live 2-hour production has been 2 years in the making, and live means there's only one shot to get it right for the hundreds gathered around me and the millions watching at home.
We pour a lot of passion into it, and I think it comes through in the arrangements. We really care about this. It's not just another project for us.
Adam Anders is the man behind the music. Popular songs with new lyrics to introduce the more than 2,000-year-old Passion story to people who've never heard it and refresh it for those who have.
You're the man behind Glee as far as music goes. You just said that you're doing Dirty Dancing as well. Where does this project fit in your wide career?
This is the pinnacle. Honestly, to me, this is the highlight of my career. It's emotional for me. I grew up in the ministry with my parents are ministers, and for me to have this long career I've already had and really feel and see that everything I've been through in my life, everything I've done in my life and career to this point have led me to this.
Adam hopes this is the start of a television tradition, traveling to a new city each year with new music, but the same message.
And we truly want people to understand that this message is beyond the word religion. You know, the word God is way bigger than the word religion. You can have a personal relationship with God. We don't need society or tradition or anyone to tell us how that relationship should be.
And that's the reason for the cross. Ephraim Graham, CBN News, New Orleans.
Thanks, Ephraim. And you can find more of Ephraim's behind-the-scenes coverage of The Passion, including more of his interview with Tyler Perry on CBNnews.com. And Pat, that was just fascinating and so amazing that was happening in New Orleans.
So, Tyler Perry is one of the most unique figures in entertainment today. He's a multi-talented guy who just brings forth story after story after story, and they all seem to be hits. So he's top of his game.